AmandaLand.
It's the AmandaLand Ambassador Welcome, Chianta. Is it Chianta?
It's Chianta.
It's Chianta. Okay. Welcome, Chianta Dorsey, to Views from AmandaLand.
Thank you for having me and inviting me on. I was very surprised at the invitation. I'm like, little old me.
Listen, we love an expert, honey. Okay. And you know, this is a nation that does not honor experts. Like, it's a problem. People really be like, I know just as much as you. Do you? I don't know. The woman's name is Great Migration Griot. I can promise you she gonna know more about the Great Migration than me. I know she will. I know she will. Well, thank you for joining us. And so basically what prompted this is I, one, am deeply committed to continuing our education around Black history as we are continuing to see the erasure of Black history. Just Black people, if they get their way, they're just gonna be like, you know, we not gonna call you Black, we just gonna act like you Black. That's what's happening right now. And I don't know your politics, but the politics over here is we are against Donald Trump. We are against all racism. We are pro-Palestine. And we are also very annoyed with Democrats. So that is the politics here at Views from AmandaLand, just so you understand the context of where you're coming into. Okay. So can you give us, there's a documentary that's available now on PBS, which, by the way, PBS will not be available much longer, but PBS.
and they've been doing such tremendous work in terms of documentaries and illuminating a lot of like unknown histories and people who aren't as well known. And so that would be very tragic if they were to go away, because they have been doing the Lord's work.
They just did the Hazel Scott documentary that I was a part of. And a lot of people don't know anything about Hazel Scott. And Hazel Scott was an incredible performer, artist, and activist. And the reason why her story has been buried was because she was shaking them folks up.
Yeah. I believe she was a casualty of the Red Scare, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, her career, yeah.
A casualty of the Red Scare. And we are here in what we call, this is another Red Scare because they love to wear red. We're not going to charge you up for wearing red today because we like red. You got the red cup.
I know, right? I'm all red. Red stands for passion. So I think of it like that.
Okay, we just gonna make it passion. It's not MAGA, y'all. There's a house down the street from my mom that's a Trump house. And I say that in that he has several Trump flags, like adorning the house. And my mom always talks about this Trump house, but she's never seen him. And so then she said, I saw the Trump man. I saw him yesterday. The Trump man came out and he was in a red polo shirt and he had a big white dog with him. And I just feel as though it was like I had seen a premonition. I was like, what are you doing? And she was dead serious, so I just listened. But I'm gonna definitely probe for more information today. I saw the Trump man. So tell us, how did you find yourself in this niche of history, and what about it drew your passion?
Yeah, so let me start off by saying my day job, I'm actually an archivist by trade. And so
naturally.
And so if some of your viewers don't know like what archivists do, we are information professionals, and we are dedicated to collecting, preserving, and providing access to like basically historically valuable materials. So we work in the field of basically cultural heritage preservation. And so we basically are tasked with preserving history. So we largely work in archives. And if you have a library, whether that's a university library in your community, a public library, more than likely it probably has an archive attached to it. And so coming from that background is based off of my own interest in history. Like
What drew you to being an archivist?
So it was a little bit of a hard journey. Okay.
Okay.
I,
That's how the journeys be.
I started off as a pre-pharm major.
A pharmacy?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I attended Xavier University of Louisiana, which is HBCU, and
that has a lot of white professors, though. It's an HBCU with a lot of white professors.
We have Black professors too.
Well, when I spoke there was a whole issue. When I spoke there was a whole issue because the white professors at the time was acting up, and the Black students was like, "I didn't come here to deal with white professors acting up."
Wait, when was this? When did you speak?
I mean, this is years ago, but I just will never forget that because I really was like, "Aren't we at an HBCU?" And they was like, "Exactly."
Yeah. So when I was there, yes, it was half and half. It was like a large white faculty as well as Black faculty. So, I was a pre-pharm major and I got to organic chem and I was like, no, this ain't it.
You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
I'm like, this is not it. I can't be out here a mediocre pharmacist. But I love history. And I had always loved history. And so I decided to change my major to history.
Okay.
And then I got to my senior year in college and I said, well, what can I do with the history degree? Because I didn't
want to be a professor.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I actually did an internship at a local archive, the Amistad Research Center, which is an independent archive in New Orleans. They specialize in preserving the history of African Americans. And my supervisor at the time, she said, wow, you're doing such good work in your internship. Maybe you should go to library school and be an archivist and major in archives management. And so that's how I got into,
Did you even know that job existed like in a real way as like a course of life? Because I feel like a lot of times we don't be knowing the jobs that are out there.
Yeah. No.
When I found out that you could be a treasure hunter, I was like, what? That's the whole job. Yes.
Get out.
Yes. It's an actual job to be a treasure hunter.
Oh, wow.
And it's like funded by NOAA, which is like the American, well, it was the American department that deals with our oceans. Yes.
Wow. I did not know that. But I didn't. I didn't quite know about archivists. That me majoring in history was actually the first time I had to go use an archive. Right. So, they had all these rules, which I thought was strange. Like I had to check my bags. I couldn't use pen, like they had all of these original like manuscript documents. And so my first experience actually using an archive, studying history was interesting.
Right.
But even then, right, it didn't click that, oh, maybe this is what you should do. Yeah. Right. So, but yeah, I thought there were all these strange rules and, you had to register as a researcher. And I was just like, oh, this is a very
official.
Yeah. I'm like, this is different. And the first archive I ever visited was the historic New Orleans collection.
Are you from New Orleans?
I'm not. My father is.
Okay.
My father, my paternal grandmother is, which I'll talk about later. Okay. But yeah, so part of what drew me to New Orleans to attend undergrad was the fact that I have family from New Orleans and from Louisiana.
Where are you from originally?
Chicago, Chi-Town.
Okay, shout out to Chicago. We got a lot of Chicago in the chat. And that's a big part of the Great Migration is Black folks
Yes.
ending up in Chicago.
Yes, yes. And so, I mean, when I went off to college, I had a connection to New Orleans. I had been there before. I had went there with my dad and my parents, my siblings. We had traveled there, and so by the time I get to college, where I'm studying history, I am forging my path as a burgeoning archivist. Like I already have a connection to the city and to the Great Migration, but I just wasn't. Things weren't connecting. When you know how you are when you're young, and you just don't have that perspective. It wasn't connecting for me at that time, but it definitely was a foundation for me starting the Great Migration Griot Instagram community and sort of leaning into like researching my family's own participation in the Great Migration.
For the record, y'all, I'm a light hoarder, but I like to call myself an archivist. I'm like, no, this is archives. That's why I have these. That's why I still have. My mom just sent me all of my, like, basically my reading materials from graduate school. So because
wow.
we had to get our at the beginning of every class, you had to go to this particular print shop and they would print out like all of the reading, because a lot of it wasn't textbook stuff. It was essays and selections, and so they would be in these big bound books. And I have to do a section of my new book, Body Waving Through the BS, which is available now for pre-order. A section of it is on Black radicalism. And so I was like, well, Mom, you need to send me my stuff. 5 boxes later, I was like, ooh, these are archives. This isn't hoarding. These are archives.
Well, a lot of archival collections that end up in archives start off as people's personal papers. Like they consist of a lot of materials collected from them just living their everyday lives, doing their work, studying, and they end up in the archive. So for a lot of personal papers, we get people's syllabi, right? From when they were in college.
Yeah.
We get their books, we get some of their class assignments, and that actually can illuminate how certain subjects were studied, how they were taught. And it can give you perspective about a person's philosophies and arguments on a certain subject based on like what they studied, the creation of, things like assignments. So, I mean, so
what you're saying is
yes, people's personal archives end up starting as can serve as a foundation for what actually ends up being donated to archives. So don't and so it's people's own personal collections, and we are grateful that there are people who engage in that type of personal collecting, because they do wind up in the archives and they can give sort of insight into like a lot of like topics and subjects. Like some people donate their own personal family archives, like their family photographs, their letters and correspondence. And even though like people may not see their family as being historically renowned, right? But those types of materials still give insight into a point in history. So,
because just think about like birthday cards from your mom, maybe like to you, it's like, okay, my mama sent me a birthday card, but 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, it's like, oh, people were sending birthday cards.
Yeah. Yeah. And people communicated this way.
Yes.
Like, and why did they? A lot of people don't think about how, you may not be a Malcolm X or a Shirley Chisholm, but your life can give insight into a period of history to somebody down the line. So yeah, it's very important for, you know, people to keep those personal collections. And I know you said hoarding. Hoarding makes it sound like junk, right?
Right.
But it can be something that is valuable and has a lot of evidentiary value.
You better say evidentiary. We love words over here. Okay. We love a good word. Evidentiary.
No, because people, I don't think, and I've spent 10 years of my career doing this, convincing people, because archives can sometimes be not so welcoming spaces because there are so many rules connected to being there. And archives for a very long time were not open spaces. Like my field is currently committed to accessibility, but it wasn't always like that. They were very closed off spaces where, you know, someone needed to write a letter of introduction to get you, and you know, to study. It was very.
I've seen this in movies. Yes, like you don't have access to this space. You need to get a referral, or you need to get approval from this department that says that you get to come and see this.
Yeah. But what are you studying, right? Because you have to be doing quote unquote serious research, right? And so, like, I've also spent my career dismantling that. You don't have to be doing research to come into the archive. You can just be curious. You can just want to see a letter from, you know, Ida B. Wells. It can be something as simple as you wanting to view.
I want to see a letter from Ida B. Wells.
Well, her collection is at the University of Chicago. Her family papers, yes. So, I mean, you don't have to be affiliated with a university. You don't have to be doing quote unquote serious research. If you are curious, just to see what materials they have, do go visit.
I shall. And so, what archive are you associated with now?
Well, you mean as my job?
Yeah.
Or, well, I like to keep my job separate.
Okay.
And what I do, but it's in the Chicago area.
Awesome. So talk to us about the Great Migration, the griot. Well, first of all, tell people who don't know, what is a griot?
In the West African tradition, they are the storyteller. They are responsible for passing down a people's, basically their history from one generation to the next. And they exist at the center of oral tradition, so that the griot is the oral traditionalist in terms of passing that knowledge down from generation to generation.
All right, y'all. So the griot. And the griot was, you know, a position of prominence in the tribe.
It was very much a position of prominence. So I see myself as continuing in that tradition when I'm talking about the Great Migration.
So talk to us about the Great Migration. Where does one need to start?
There's so much. Like there's so many ways you can go. And I have learned this just by, you know, starting my page. I was like, wow, there's a lot of places you can end up. And for me, I feel like starting with your own family. So that is how I started.
Okay.
You know, growing up, I listened to stories about my grandmother and how she moved from Mississippi with her parents and how they came to Chicago. So even very young, I knew that my family's roots were not always in Chicago, right? That there was something, my family line existed in another place, and it was firmly rooted in the South. The same thing with my father. My father is from New Orleans. He came to Chicago with my grandmother and his aunt. And my aunt.
Yep.
So just listening to those stories of, okay, we weren't always in Chicago. We were in another place before this. And again, I didn't make the connection. Like, I learned in school that there was a Great Migration. And I was just like, oh, okay, that must have been what my grandmother was a part of, and my father, that my dad never said, oh, I was part of the Great Migration. My grandmother never said I was part of the Great Migration. They never presented it like that. They were just like, I moved. I left for different reasons, and I ended up here. So I actually had to, when I was being taught about the Great Migration, I was like, oh, that's my family. So that was sort of the starting point of me, coming into this project. And I felt, I was like, wow, I'm an archivist. I get paid to preserve other people's history and other people's legacies. And I hadn't done this work for my own family.
Right.
I was like, the irony is not the irony is not lost on me. And so 2 years ago, I committed myself to interviewing different family members, learning more about our participation in the Great Migration, and starting this page. So it was very, I guess, somewhat ego-led in terms of trying to, figure out, my family's journey and how I arrived, because without the Great Migration, I don't exist. That's just a fact. I don't see any other historical forces coming together that brings, my mother and father together, outside of the Great Migration. So that is, I started with myself, and I got a little obsessed.
We love it. We love a hyperfixation.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit obsessed. And so as I started to interview my family members, and they started, I learned about them in ways that I didn't know before. Things about them, like the schools and the jobs, and how my aunts and uncles moved throughout the city, the different neighborhoods they used to live in. And so I started researching more about those little details. My aunt, she went to Wendell Phillips High School, which is located in Bronzeville, during the 40s. And actually this high school...
Contextualize that for us.
Yeah.
Bronzeville during the 40s, what does that mean for us?
Yes. So Bronzeville was a basically this microcosm of Black excellence in Chicago during the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. It is where you have so many... It's one of the few places where Black migrants can live, first off, because they were very restricted in terms of where they could go when they got to Chicago. And Chicago's Black population during the Great Migration, we're talking about it tripled and quadrupled. It was people were arriving faster than what they had housing to accommodate.
Right.
And again, the fact that you had de facto segregation and a restriction of where Black people could live in Chicago, like exacerbated, like, that
Yeah.
the living and housing crisis. And so
Can we just take a moment to acknowledge how much we love Ms. Chianta Dorsey's vocabulary? Can we just I just want to take a moment. We love it. Just so you know.
And so Bronzeville was sort of this like cultural landscape where Black people thrived, and they had businesses, they had schools, and they created this. They made a restriction into something in a thriving economic, social, and what will become a political community. And Wendell Phillips High School was one of the high schools that they had to sort of like expand, and it became a predominantly Black high school. It wasn't always that way. But when you as Southerners came flooding in, like it also caused, white people to move out of a lot of neighborhoods. And so Wendell Phillips went from being a predominantly white high school to a predominantly Black high school. And they had to expand it because, Southerners had children. They had to go to school. My aunt was one of them. And she went to school during the 40s. And I found out that at Wendell Phillips, because of you had so many people migrating into Chicago and settling in Bronzeville, they had to go to school in shifts.
Oh.
Right? So it's just like me sort of like taking nuggets of, personal stories from my family members and researching it even more. So what did it mean to go to Wendell Phillips High School in the 1940s? That was actually a post on my page. I found photos from the 1940s of students at Wendell Phillips. So it's just like just not being satisfied with just the interviews. It's like what was
the world?
Like sort of pulling out nuggets of information and researching that even more is what basically I've been doing for the past 2 years.
So let's take it even back to just the basics. Can you just lay out for people what is the Great Migration? Because I already saw somebody in here say, why would she be referring to them as migrants?
Yeah, so I'll answer that question because that was a heated topic on my page.
Okay.
It was a very heated
It makes perfect sense to me, but carry on.
So just a little background on the Great Migration. It's one of the largest internal migrations in U.S. history. It occurred between 1910 and 1970, and it was basically an estimated 6 million Black Americans migrated out of the South to the Midwest, the East Coast, and the West Coast. And so there are two phases of the Great Migration. Both of them are basically driven by both world wars. So the first phase is from 1910 to 1930. And World War I, and there was a lack of European immigration. And because of that, all of these jobs in the North had to be filled by somebody. And
now, a lot of people, I think, correct me if I feel like a lot of people think the Great Migration started after the Emancipation Proclamation.
Well, there were prior migrations,
but the
great one was from 1910 to 1970.
Because that was the scatter after, that's what they call it, the scatter after the Emancipation Proclamation. Basically, Black folks was just like, we out.
Yeah, so it starts in trickles, like after the Civil War, but the floods come and they're driven by jobs up north. And World War I, there was a lack of European immigration who was doing a lot of the factory jobs. So since they couldn't migrate here to do those jobs, they wanted Black people to basically fill that that labor absence. And so the first wave is from 1910 to 1930. And then the second great wave, again, which is driven by World War II, and the need for labor up north, is from 1940 to 1970. And so Black people leave the South. And just to give an idea of how fundamentally exceptional the migration is. So before 1910, before the Great Migration starts, 90% of Black people are living in the South.
Yep.
90%. So only 10% of Black people are living somewhere else outside the South. By the end of the Great Migration in 1970, less than half of Black people are living in the South. So that should give sort of an idea of how many Black people actually left the South. So migrant if we're talking about the period during the Great Migration and that term, migrant by the dictionary definition, right, is someone who moves from place to place, like looking for work or better economic opportunities.
It's not refugee. That's not the word that people think. I think that's what people are hearing when you say migrant.
Yes. And so even when, I was watching the new Great Migration documentary, I was actually looking to see if they would use the word migrant. And they did. They did use the word and it's just someone moving from place to place, looking for better economic opportunities. Now, on my page, I do use that term. And
did they connotate it in the context of the migrants that are coming from Central America and really basically trying to say, I know they did.
Yes,
why am I asking
some people, right? Some people, not all. Some people were saying, okay, they're not migrants. These are American. They were like, these are Black Americans. We're Americans. We're not.
We're also migrants.
I had to do a video on this because I had to do a video. And the issue is still not dead. But people, I said when I use the word migrant, I'm not
demeaning them.
Right. And I'm not that I know that term is currently related to people, immigrants and people who are migrating here from other places. I said, but
migrant is
yes. I was like, I'm just referring
these
to
are different words. Immigrant and migrant are different words.
Yeah. And I'm like, you guys,
but
you don't have to be moving from another country to be a migrant.
You're an immigrant.
You can be a migrant moving from within your country and be an American citizen as Black people were, right?
You can also be an immigrant that's not a migrant.
Yes.
Right? If your beloved lives somewhere that you're going to move to because you're marrying them, you're not moving for an economic, elevation or for work. You're moving for love. Yeah. You're a love-migrant.
So it was a very heated topic on my page, and
upsets me for you.
Yeah,
upsets me for you.
So
because you're an expert and they're arguing with you instead of learning,
which is okay.
I don't think so.
I
don't think so. I don't think it's okay to argue. I think it's okay to ask for clarity because you're not. If I'm on your page and I'm like, why are you using migrant? And you give me a legitimate response, that has nothing to do with my feelings.
Yeah, this is what I went into this page thinking. Because
for your hands. This is
the first time I have ventured into social media land in this way, right?
Yeah.
So I always expected my page to be a community for descendants of the Great Migration to come.
I know you did.
and share their stories. And I would share my stories, and it will be a community.
beautiful.
I know, and we can,
Yeah.
we can engage in different topics.
I know.
And so for me, I was already somewhat mentally prepared for what could happen. And so you can't make a comment on my page unless you follow me.
Okay.
So that, I think that's cut down on a lot of
Yes.
craziness that can come.
Yes.
But my followers, for the most part, they've engaged in very respectful
Good.
discussions,
Good.
even if it gets heated.
What are they? What is it getting heated about?
The migrant. That's been the most heated topic.
You know what? Let me tell you why that is, why I'm sticking with this so much today. Because when I woke up this morning, the transmission that came to me was about how American exceptionalism has invaded the minds of Black Americans in a way that prevents us from being able to critique the systems that are actually impeding us. And I was thinking about this because I do feel that I have a certain objectivity because I was raised in America in a Grenadian home. So I have like a broader kind of sensibility where I don't take America personal in the way that a lot of people do, who, like, if this is your only source of heritage, I can see why that may be the case. However, it ends up harming us when we are engaging in a false sense of preservation that doesn't advance us. And I feel like what I watch a lot right now with the government, with politics, is there's a lot of Black folks who have a false sense of American exceptionalism about themselves, because they're including themselves in American exceptionalism in a way that America does not include Black people. And so they're like acting as servants to protect something that doesn't protect them, which is ultimately, I believe, going to impede our ability to truly fight for ourselves in the way that we need to right now. So when I see people simply not wanting to just accept a definition that is accurate because of their attachment to not wanting to be seen as less than.
Yeah.
You understand? Am I like,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that is an impediment. That's an impediment. That's an intellectual impediment. That's an advancement impediment. And it's still attached to this idea of like holding on to American identity in a way that America has never held on to us. Right? Because even what you're saying is that people were migrating to the North to do jobs that they had given to other folks. Right?
And when they came back,
they fired them.
Black people were expendable. Yes, absolutely.
And we ended up in these neighborhoods that were adversely affected by industry. Correct?
Yes. Deindustrialization. Yes. Had a very devastating effects on the different communities the different Black communities that were dependent on them for these jobs. And once that went away, there was disinvestment, there was deterioration. And so yes, deindustrialization definitely was one of the main factors that caused some of the communities to collapse. So, yeah.
I'm just saying, Chianta. I keep wanting to call you Chianta because of Chianti.
Yeah.
And my ex and I had taken a cooking class where he learned how to make Chianti steak. And let me just tell y'all, he would then make that like once a month. Like, and it was just like, it's OD now. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just making the same meal over and over. Can we expand? I'm just saying, can we expand?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So part, and that was like, your conversation about American exceptionalism, right? Is part of like this back and forth that they were having about that term. Someone was like, one person was like, you are so beholden to trying to differentiate us. And like America doesn't really even has never even considered Black people as full citizens. Like, why are you going that far? Right. Because someone used the term Black people, that were migrating were legal migrants. And so that just opened up, but again,
that to me is a
yeah.
complete reflection of what I'm talking about. It's like,
Yeah.
that doesn't protect you, babe.
Yeah. But again, into my foray into social media land, I built the community for us to have these discussions. And I knew that I wasn't going to always agree with some of the arguments made. And I knew that I would probably have to defend some of my stances, even the use of the term migrant.
Well, I'm here to tell you that that's not a stance. That's a definition.
Yeah.
That's they're politicizing a word that is, it's not like you're taking something like CRT and just making it something else.
Yeah.
They took the word woke and decided this means something else. They took, there's a list. There's so many of these words that they have just completely bastardized and turned into all types of things. And at the end of the day, legal or not, a migrant is somebody who moves somewhere to work. If I'm moving place to place, like some of these newscasters, baby, they migrants because they moving from place to place just to be on the mic to say, hi, I am Amanda Seals here at 9:00 news in Tulsa. And then they got to move. Like, that's a job that causes that. I mean, I don't know. I'm stuck on this because I can't stand unintellectualism. And it is it is the culture of this country.
Yeah.
And I want us to. I want you to get your props. You name the site Great Migration Griot. Like, you name the page. So tell me this. What are some of the aspects that you feel like people can take from the Great Migration knowledge that you've gained that they can apply perhaps in this time?
I want to say using it to gain a sense of why your neighborhood or your community or your city looks the way it does. When I, starting delving into the history about the Great Migration, I was like, oh, this is why Chicago looks the way it looks. This is why the South Side is predominantly Black. This is why segregation, why Chicago as a city is such a segregated city. This is why this community is named Bronzeville. This is why so many other people who I meet have family from the South, like I do. So it's learning about the Great Migration has definitely opened my eyes to why Chicago looks the way it looks, socially, politically, economically. It made me realize why some of the issues that we have with disinvestment in certain parts of the South Side of Chicago looks. Why is the interstate where it is?
Yeah.
Right? Like it has really illuminated so many things for me in my everyday life. So, if you want to delve deep into the Great Migration, I would definitely say look at where you live first and how, especially if you're like in places like LA, Philadelphia, New York City, Gary, Newark, Milwaukee, definitely think about how Black people exist in these cities and how the Great Migration has influenced that existence, because it definitely has. Like, that's how momentous or monumental this movement was. It changed this country. So it created these thriving Black cultural spaces in the North and the West, in these urban landscapes. And so I definitely think people should think about it along those lines.
So we're going to go to some questions. You ready?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
It's about migrant.
So Cassie Carnahan says, Ms. Dorsey, I have many audio files of grandma stories on my Google Drive. Any idea what to do with this to preserve in a good way?
Yeah. So this is the thing about what I call in my field digital preservation. You have to be very vigilant about materials in digital format, if in terms of long-term preservation. So a book can stay in its original form, and you can still read it and get information from it, as long as the book is on a shelf, or if you place it somewhere, you'll always be able to get the information. It'll exist.
Right.
For digital materials, it's not the same thing. You have something called technological obsolescence. And so what that means, it's an archivist term. So what that means is technology evolves so fast, right? It becomes obsolete. So there used to be a such thing as floppy disks, right? However, they don't build computers anymore where you can read or get the information off floppy disks.
Right.
So with digital files, whether they are photographs, whether they are AV materials, you have to make sure that you're transferring that material to each evolving technology, right? Yeah. Unless you want to take transcribe, right, transcribe and then print them, and they're in paper form. That is another way you can sort of preserve and fight against that technological obsolescence. But you have to remember, with digital files, you or somebody after you will always have to be involved in the migration of that material to each successive technology.
There you go. Great answer. Thank you.
It's great that you have your audio files. I have mine too. But the Library of Congress, they have a great page where they talk about digital preservation, and where they give advice on people who are preserving their family history and their AV files. So I definitely, if anyone is viewing, I definitely would recommend that they go to the Library of Congress page, because they do offer suggestions and tips for preserving different types of media, right?
Yeah.
So.
All right, next question. Rolando says, hey, Ms. Dorsey, I hear the archives in Utah are expensive. Do you know anything about that? If so, why Utah?
What do you mean? What they mean? It's expensive. You have to, what does that mean?
Like, it's expensive, I guess, to get access to them.
Oh, well, it shouldn't be a cost to actually get in them. They may charge for reproductions. Okay. So if you need...
Oh, expansive. I said expensive. My fault. Expansive, y'all. Expansive. One little letter, one little vowel had us on a whole other trajectory.
Wait, so he said the archives in Utah are expansive?
Apparently, yeah.
Ah, that's great. He should visit them.
I wonder why Utah, though. That's what
well, every state has, I'm pretty sure it has its own state archive. Like every I imagine there is some local body that is
Mormons. Oh, someone else said it's got to be the Mormons.
listen, there is somebody within your city and state that is preserving that state or that city's history. So just about every state more than likely has a state archive. And so it's not something that's just, you know, just Utah. It's every state.
Yeah, but expansive is a particular word. Apparently, the Mormons don't play about records. Find Mormon records in our global database of over 33.3 billion historical records. So maybe that's like culturally a part of Mormonism. They did start a whole religion like from scratch. I'm not going to go into that, but they, so there's a beginning that they can cite.
And a lot of archives, they don't have huge budgets to operate from. There is labor attached to the work. Sometimes a lot of people think we do what we do because we love it, and I'm just like, well, I do love it, but I also need to eat and pay my bills. Yeah. So I can continue to do this work. And so I do want to tell people to support their local archives through funding, or if they have fundraisers, because it helps us, do the work.
Well, look at what we're learning from the chat. Apparently, it's foundational to Mormonism. So I guess it's maybe their version of griot, of like this record keeping being a part of the actual, it is culturally a part of the thing. Listen, our chat be teaching. Our chat ain't arguing about migrant. Okay. I'm gonna y'all need to go over there to the Great Migration Griot and follow.
Well, they're not the only religion that is.
Of course not.
Very,
but in Utah, Utah, they running things in Utah. They running things. If they want the salt out the lake, they can make it happen. All right, Vanessa says, Ms. Dorsey, I would love to know what the most bizarre piece of history you've come across is.
Oh my God, I don't even know if I want to tell you all this.
Please.
Well, so
when I was the fact that you had it right top of mind, she didn't even have to search for it. She said, I know.
And I hate to say this because it's kind of disgusting, but I'll say it because. So when I was working in an archive, there was a organization in the South that was working to integrate public schools.
Okay.
And this organization received a lot of hate mail because of them working to integrate the schools.
Okay.
One of the pieces, I mean, like terrible, like N-word this, that, it was like, and so one of the letters, which was in Mylar, it was encased in Mylar, which is like a plastic, right? Where you can't actually touch the actual document. And the piece of hate mail says, in Lover, I'm not sending my children, to school with Black people. I don't like your organization. And this is what I think of it. I'm going to wipe my derriere. And on the letter is a stain. And so it was clear that this person had actually did that. And so that has been one of the most bizarre things that
the commitment
what I found in the archive. Yes. And like, so, and yeah, so like and like as an archivist, processing those types of collections, particularly if you're Black, they can have like very negative effects on you, particularly if you're talking about hate mail, right? And like as an archivist, part of our job is organizing the records and describing them in a way that makes sense to researchers. And so there has to be a level of reading and delving into the materials to get this information and do the work. And so things like that can have sort of very negative impacts on, you know, archivists, on archivists doing the work. So, but yes, that's one of the craziest things.
Thank you.
I have found. I have other things, but that's the most.
It was like top of mind. You just was like, yep.
Unhinged. Right, I was like, oh, this is gonna, and I was I was like, oh, this is unhinged. The level to do this and to mail it to someone like is a new level of unhinged, in my opinion.
I agree. Last question. Ms. Dorsey, how does your organization decide whether or not someone's personal things are worthy of being archived?
Yes. So we usually have archives usually have a collection development policy. And we have a collecting scope. So there's usually like different themes or subjects that a particular archive collects on. So if you have family materials, that falls within an archive's collecting scope, they would more than likely consider acquiring those materials. So again, it's not about whether you're known to history. It's not about that. It's, largely, do these materials fall within our collecting scope? Do we have the resources to preserve them for posterity? Can we give access to them, right? Because we don't want like heavy restrictions on materials because we can't give access to things with like heavy restrictions. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't accept things that have to be restricted, because we do. Sometimes confidentiality or privacy means we have to restrict things for a certain number of years. But we use our collection development policy, which defines our collecting scope on what we acquire. And usually you can talk to an archivist. If you want to consider donating things, you can talk to an archivist before about whether your materials fall within or outside of the collecting scope.
Great answers. Really. This has been such a treat, because I was really just expecting to learn about the Great Migration, but I think all of us are really appreciative of learning about archiving and our role in archiving, especially within the context of, again, the commitment to erasure. We all need to be archivists. Like,
you probably are already.
My mother is the archivist for our family. Like, my mother, and I inadvertently became that too. Like, I have pictures of people from time periods that they don't have pictures of themselves.
Oh, wow.
Because I've kept everything. Like, if you ask me to pull up a picture from 1989 right now, I'm like, which picture you want? Like, it's in my phone. Like I have a lot of friends who they didn't take pictures. Their family wasn't big on pictures. So like, I have record of them in high school.
Oh, that's great.
Like, I have record of them in college. And they're like, dang, I forgot I had hair. You know what I mean? Like, something like that. Like, my ex, I archived his time in college, like at SUNY Purchase. Yes. Like, he would say that all the time. Like, you have my archives. Like,
well, he could still create. He still has time. He isn't dead yet.
Is he? We don't even know, girl. We don't even know. Is he? Is he alive? We don't even. Devon, you out there? I want my money. In case you're listening, he's the type of dude who probably watched this show every day, girl. He probably watched this show every day. Crying. Good Lord. Well, Chianta, you are fabulous, and you all go follow at Great Migration Griot on the IG. We so appreciate the work that you're doing and that you continue to do. And thank you for teaching and schooling so much of us.
Absolutely.
Now, one thing I will say, L.A. Jones, Levon says, all stuff burned in a house fire. So this is a reason why I do think, physical pictures are great. I also try my best to digitize those and put them into some type of cloud.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do that. And my mom has been trying to get that done because of the same exact reason. I'm so sorry you lost all those pictures.
Yeah, lots of copies keep things safe. That's actually a little acronym in the archives world. It's called LOCKS. Lots of copies keep things safe. So
lots of y'all, we learning the lingo. Okay, we learning the lingo.
But some families actually donate their families, collections because they are afraid that they might lose it, like in a flood or a fire. So that is one of the things that can too spur us gaining collections.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And remember, if there's any archive news that needs to get shared, you can come right on back and be like, this is what's going on, y'all, in the archive world. Let me put y'all on. So thank you so much, Chianta. You have a great rest of your day. And thank you for being our ambassador of the week. Come on, y'all. Man, this show is special. This show is special. Dang, that was so dope. So many of these people are people who literally I come across on Instagram. Sometimes it'll be someone who's a TikToker who gets posted on Instagram, but I'll come across them and I'll just reach out to them and be like, hey, you want to come on the show? Because I'm really trying my best to really also not just center folks who are already platformed. You know what I mean? I don't know that that's necessarily helpful to keep seeing the same people all the time, especially people that have already been on, that have been on mainstream media, etc. I pretty much already know what you own. So once I already know what you own, I'm I don't really know that that's very helpful per se in the in expansion of conversation. So I've been trying to find more younger folks, people in specific fields of expertise, etc., and really just trying to expand our consciousness of people who have information and that aren't simply just personalities. Okay? Yeah, the rate... Well, it's literally just a button you press and they're just like, bye. So I try to ease into it, but essentially it's bye. So that was Chianta Dorsey. Thank you so much for joining us. I enjoyed laughing and learning with you. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And tell your friends. Also, listen to the podcast. It's available everywhere pods are casted. Listen ad-free by subscribing to Patreon Amanda Seals. Come on and join the Seals Squad. Views from AmandaLand. Live 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Wednesday, with content on Thursday and Friday at YouTube Amanda Seals TV.
Smart Finance.